What is good, family? Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are now tuned in to the I Am Courtney Michelle with your girl, Courtney Michelle. What is going on? I hope everything and everyone is doing well. What is going on with the chat? RM, I see you. Natalie J. Bones, what is going on? So what's going on, CJ? I see you, M Town. This is going to be a interesting one, definitely because I want to make sure that I do two things this evening. My first objective is to go over the clip, which I was extremely excited about when I saw it, and then I was like, a little cringy. So I wanted to break that down and also really talk about something that I think is very important that we haven't really touched on a lot in this particular space. That is, as far as domestic violence, as it relates to men. So I definitely want to talk about that. I do have a couple special guests coming on. And before they do, I want to talk about, let's talk about domestic violence first. The clip that I'm talking about, and you saw it in the thumbnail, it was, of course, my favorite duo, Playback. They did a reaction video for Lapeef show that we were all on a few months ago, and I want to do it. I want to do its justice. Domestic violence with men doesn't get talked about a lot. So I know when we say, yeah, if someone hits you, hit them back, I totally get it. But the essence of what it is when a woman hits a man and how it's always thrown under the rug, it's never talked about. Consequences with the women usually never get talked about either. And nor do we really understand like the reports and how often it happens. So that's one thing that I do want to touch on today. So y'all know. Can you play the clip? Huh? Oh, I'm gonna play it. Don't you worry about that. We're gonna play some of it. But let me bring this up real quick because I want to make sure that we all are educating ourselves as far as the importance of knowing how often it does happen to men, and it does. It's definitely something serious. Um, yeah, let me bring it up. All right, so me wanting to talk about domestic violence and how often it happens to men. Again, it is serious. Um, let's go over some of these stats first before we get all into the conversation this evening. So, as you can see on the screen, it says about 1 in 7 men ages 18 and older have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner. Almost half, that's 48.8%, which again, I think a lot of us don't realize how often it happens. Um, Maybe men do since you guys are the brunt of it, but almost half of all men have dealt with some sort of psychological aggression by an intimate partner. This number is equal to women at 84.4%. So, again, it is slightly higher as far as this particular type of abuse. Nearly 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner to the point they were scared for their life or safety, or the lives or safety of loved ones. Of rape, which, let me not say the R, excuse me, of the R word, which I don't even think that we understand that men suffer this too. But of the R word on men that are committed by someone known to the survivor, about 29% where it was an intimate partner. So, again, these stats are telling me that domestic violence, when it's the aggression is towards men, is 50-50 when it comes to women and men. So, why this is not talked about, I don't know. It could be maybe guys don't want to say as much. And if that's the case, I think this is something that we really, really need to focus on and talk about as well. There's a couple more stats that I'll go over real quick. Men are the victims in about 6% of cases of murder suicide in which the offender is an intimate partner. An estimated of 10.4%, or approximately 11.7 million men in the US have reported having an intimate partner get or attempt to get pregnant when the male partner didn't agree with it. Shout out to Drake, hot sauce in his bag. But again, this is something that we don't talk about. And I really, really want to talk about this tonight. The average cost for men seeking emergency care following an attack by intimate partner is $387. About 2 in 5 gay or bisexual men will experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime, and nearly 8% of males who've reported domestic violence have been shot at, stabbed, or hit with a weapon. So those stats for me is alarming. It is alarming because men obviously haven't had a voice when it comes to being attacked by an intimate partner, whether they're bisexual, whether they're straight, really doesn't matter. This gets underreported by men a lot. I want to know why, and maybe come up with some ideas, which I think that's what we were trying to do in the clip, on how we can kind of bring more awareness to this. Now, whether it's women needing to understand you don't put your hands on anyone, whether it's men reporting it more. I think both can be true at the same time. I'm going to bring some stuff up here. And again, if you guys are coming in, welcome. Let's see. All right. So before I play some of the clips and talk about that video playback, oh Lord, I tagged them. I hope Agent comes on. He's cute. So let me bring over my special guest. Let me make sure that she's on because she was the headliner on the thumbnail. She's been super famous this week.
Hey, what's up?
Okay. So, welcome. How are you this evening?
I'm great. So glad to be here.
I,
What's going on?
yeah, hey, well, I'm always excited to chit chat with you when I can.
Mm-hmm.
So, first, I want to get your opinion because, I know you pretty much saw it where we had the reaction video done on us.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel first when you saw it? Not even open up and watching it, but how did you feel to see your face like?
I saw that thumbnail and I was like, I literally didn't even say that. I didn't say that. I specifically said that, people should keep their hands to themselves. And you remember that we were on that show. We both like we could all agree that, people should keep their hands to themselves. So, I clicked it. I'm like, what's going on in here? And I just don't like when thumbnails are misleading, trying to paint it like someone did something that they didn't really do, whether it be like trying to paint a man or a woman. Like, I just don't like that. So when I first saw it, I was like, oh my goodness. I kind of went in like, oh, I'm ready for some nonsense. But, I watched the beginning, and they were doing the reaction. I was like,
Mhm.
okay. And that clip was so long ago. When was
It,
that?
it was 4 months ago.
Yeah, like 4 months ago. I just mm-mm. I
Yeah.
didn't know what to say. I didn't even realize that that would be controversial for me to think that someone who's way bigger shouldn't hit someone who's way smaller if they aren't hurt. Like, of course, if you're hurt or if like you feel like your life is on the line or something, I get it. Like, I'm not saying that no one can
Okay.
ever.
So this is what we'll do. Okay. I'm going to play it and we'll discuss some of the stuff
Yes,
as far as
please.
what they said, get a little bit more explanation to it, because context matters. And what's kind of sometimes frustrating in this space, because between Kevin Samuels and Lapeef Network gets the most reaction videos that I think I've ever seen in my life. But with the reaction videos, you guys are seeing literally a clip that's maybe 10 minutes long on a show that's 7 hours. So sometimes it doesn't get its just due. For this particular one, I wanted to give its just due because I think the topic is important. And with clarification as far as what we were trying to say or what was not said in the clips, I want to discuss that. But then I also want to discuss some things that men can do to prevent, because the essence of that show, of the topic, was really, really simple.
Mm-hmm.
What can men do to protect themselves? All right, so let me pull it up. Let's share it. All right. I'm going to play a little bit at the beginning, and I'm going to do this for a reason because this is the beginning of the reaction video. But again, if you can see, we were talking. Well, you can't see it on here, but this was maybe about 2.5 hours into a conversation.
But I'm just saying, hypothetically, if a woman that was small hit you, do you think you should hit her back even though you weren't hurt?
I absolutely think I should have the right to hit that lady back. No,
Even if
no,
you weren't hurt?
absolutely. It
Why?
cannot be the case that some
Um,
5'3" woman gets to run around and hit every 6-foot man. Like, what world are you living in? Just because you can't hurt, wait. Just because a woman is 5'3" and can't hurt a man over 6 foot means that she just gets to walk around and hit every single man willy-nilly?
No. Look at it. That's a lead attorney. I know who he is. He didn't just say, maybe so, I think so. No, but it said absolutely.
Are you able to hear it, Kay?
Yeah, I hear it. It's real choppy.
Oh, yeah, it is.
I think this applies not just with men and women, but anytime there's a huge size difference. Just be like, you'll get points for whooping someone's ass if there's a huge size difference.
I don't think he's talking about getting points. I think he's saying...
No, I feel it. But like, for example, when Duke and Davis were mad at each other, Duke is bigger than Davis. I can reasonably believe Duke would whoop Davis' ass. Who knows? It might be different, but I can reasonably believe just from the size difference. So to calm him down, Phantom told Duke, this was like years ago when we did a football video, and it was getting a little physical. He's like, bro, you can regret hating him afterwards. You're not gonna gain nothing out of the situation because he's like, you're obviously gonna win the fight. Yeah. So I think in those situations, don't strike.
I get that, but that would thus mean that the bigger person.
Yeah, you'd have to be the bigger person.
Yeah,
you'd have to be the bigger person.
But then it's like, okay, so all men know not to just randomly go around striking men, even if you're in a situation.
You might get your ass beat.
Unless you're really
There's
prepared.
plenty of shit I can't do.
An opportunity to get your ass.
Bro, if I'm in a different city, there's plenty of shit I can't do unless I'm trying to get run up on.
Yeah.
I can't even look at you too long. If I don't know who you are, bro, and you're posted up, I can't even look at you too long. Do a U-turn. If I do a U-turn, I can't go back to the same block as I already looked. There's a lot of rules. I just know not to do these things because I want to put myself in a position where somebody tries me. Because I'm not trying to get sued, bro. I got too much shit to lose or get my ass beat or get shot at, bro. I love my life.
Which is crazy because I think women don't live by that, though. Women clearly don't live by those like land of the law because they know for a fact that men are not going to put their hands on women. So what she's saying is true. Like she's not even addressing like the mental state of a woman to decide to put their hand on a man regardless, knowing that there's a really good opportunity that you're going to get your ass beat. So men who know that there's a really good chance they're going to get their ass beat, but they're not doing nothing to another man. They're not even like you said, not even looking, not even driving by a certain way.
All right, so I'm gonna stop it right there. So, what did you think about lead attorney's reaction to your question?
I mean, like I was saying, I don't think that it's a good thing to encourage, unequal. And I understand that you can not control somebody's reaction. If you hit somebody, you don't know what to be ready for. I'm not saying that you can control that reaction or that you should, do anything as it relates to like trying to gauge what reaction someone's going to give. But when he responded, I was just like, so like, even if you're not hurt. So my thought was like, why would you feel the need? And I'm not saying that he said this because I think he said the right to hit someone smaller. But like, if we're even talking about like the law and rights and whatnot, if somebody steps on my shoe and I severely do something to them, I'm still going to be in trouble. Like, that's not okay. It's an unequal situation. If I'm walking out in public and somebody brushes against my shoulder or even slightly pushes me and then I turn around and do something like drastic, that's still not okay. So like, I just think, I just thought the response was interesting, I guess I could say. If someone's way smaller and weaker than me, I'm not even going to feel the need to do anything to them. I would just probably laugh and walk away.
I thought the response was interesting because you asked a question. However, this is what I want to play before we get more into the playback, because I don't think anyone understands what happened at the beginning. So that was just a part of where it started. But let me show this of the conversation that we had and the beginning before you even asked that.
It's going back to kind of what I was asking Anton earlier when you thought it was a shot, Lee. When y'all were like, it's a shot. It wasn't a shot. The reason I asked is because let's say a kid hits me. They can't hurt me. So I'm never going to beat up a kid. I would never. because they will never hurt me.
You should never allow an adult or even your kid to go around hitting people. Like, who raises?
Which wasn't said.
And we all agree that you shouldn't allow people to go around hitting people. No one advocated for that. No one.
Right. No
What is
one
wrong
would.
with you guys?
It should not be okay to hit somebody. It shouldn't be okay to hit somebody ever.
You want to be equal? We're gonna make it equal across
It should
the board.
never be okay.
If you're man enough to snuggle up, then you man.
It should never be okay to hit somebody, whether you're a male or a female.
I agree. So you need to tell them to exercise self-restraint.
Right, but
I'm gonna stomp you out. If I gotta defend myself, I'm stomping you out.
Okay, understandable. Whatever. The question though.
I made it clear to my daughter that she should not be going around hitting people. Period. Doesn't matter.
But she has to learn her lesson too. She has to learn. You can't stop her from learning that lesson.
Oh,
no one should hit anyone.
And he hits her back. That is her lesson. Period. It's like if she's dumb enough to do that and she gets hit for it, I'm not going to defend her in that situation.
Wait a minute.
That's her lesson.
I'm amazed that all of y'all want all of these equal rights, and then when you equally man up against somebody, now you asking me to exercise restraint instead of trying to chastise the person that decided to want to knuckle up with the guy. How is this?
I don't think
No. It's so,
women.
It's so backwards because y'all want us to be reactive instead of you being proactive and keeping your motherfucking hands to yourself. Keep your hands to yourself and you won't get stomped out. You ain't got to worry about me. No. You ain't got to worry about me ever putting my hands on a woman if you keep your hands to yourself and you get out my face. Stay out my face. We never gonna have this conversation, and then it's over. It's very simple. Keep your hands to yourself. I don't know no guy that's walking around looking for a fight with a woman. Often at times, if you find a guy, and I'm not talking about the extreme cases of abuse, if you find a guy that's in a scrap with a woman, often at times it was initiated by her. Keep your hands to yourself. Stop advocating for equal rights, and don't cry when you get stomped out on the side of the road because you decided to think you was a man and you're not. It's not. Okay. Don't do that. We tired of that. We're not having that no more.
The only question is, I agree. No one should hit anybody. I've never hit a man. A man didn't hit me. I've never hit anybody. I don't hit people. I don't think people should hit people. I mean, I just don't. I don't think kids should hit other kids, male or female, whatever. My question though is like, Lee, I want you to answer this. So, you're saying that if a woman hits someone, like a woman tries to hit you, right? You're tall, you weigh a lot, you're a big man. So like you're saying a woman probably wouldn't be able to hurt you, right? Like let's say me, I can't hurt you because I'm like a foot shorter than you and much lighter than you. So I wouldn't be able to hurt you. So my question is, do you think it's okay if you as a man were not hurt? And I would never do it, so I'm not trying to advocate for people hitting, but I'm just saying hypothetically, if a woman that was small hit you, do you think you should hit her back even though you weren't hurt?
I absolutely think I should have the right to hit that lady back. No.
Okay. So that was the beginning, which I think was said multiple of times. Keep your hands to yourself. We do not advocate hitting anyone. Keep your hands to yourself. Multiple of times.
So many.
However,
still.
But the question that you had, I think, was a legit question because it was relating to what we were talking about. How can a man protect himself? So women keep their hands to themselves. Men keep their hands to themselves. But there are situations that that we're not supposed to be in, or things that we don't want to happen, but things happen. I think we have to, when we're in this space, we have to deal with reality. Like we can always say, don't you do it. Don't you do it. You better not. Like we get it. There's not a soul that advocates for violence. Not me, and for sure not Kay. But when we ask these questions, and again, like I said, that part, of course, was taken out. You saying don't hit men. I don't advocate it. I want to make sure, but this is a question to an attorney. So that part I think was kind of left out. So you think that was on purpose?
I don't know. I think actually during that show I mentioned something about like what we should be sharing in terms of ideologies around this topic. You know, in case someone's watching that's like listening. Now, like you said earlier, you know, we have to deal with reality and what things are. Sometimes things are not fair, which I think is terrible. I think that if something is happening to a man, they shouldn't automatically, you know, think that the woman is the victim. It's not always the case like that. I mean, it just depends on the situation, what's happening. But if I were to ever talk to a man that I care about, I would not say, yes, you should absolutely, you know, and I'm not saying that anyone said this because I know TLA said he should have the right to, which is much different than I will do that. So just to be very clear, before somebody chops this up into a clip, but I wouldn't advocate for a man to take a stance like, oh, this is what I should do, even though I'm not hurt. Because if you're not hurt and the people come to your house and she has bruises all over her and you're standing there fine, you're probably going to go to jail. Now, is this always a just situation? No. And there are things that need to happen about this if, you know, a woman is doing things to a man that are harming him. But like I said, if you're not hurt, it would be best to leave, then call the police and say, look, I want to press charges. This person assaulted me. It's not worth going to jail and having a record for if you can help it. Because I know that a lot of men get caught up in those things for like they didn't even do anything a lot of the times. And it's just like, oh, you're the man here. So you're the one that, you know, is going to be arrested or whatever. So I just think that people have to be really careful with what they do in these situations.
Yeah. So again, Eric, because I'm looking at the chat, no one is saying that you should not keep your hands. You should keep your hands here. So no one is saying, yeah, a woman should hit a man. No one is saying that.
You should have made that the banner, Courtney. Like Kay
no one
and
is saying that.
Say, keep your hands to yourself.
So, right. You know, it's the chat is interesting because no one is saying that. So here's the thing. When you find yourself in situations which is uncalled for because it's going to happen, then what? To say you should keep your hands to yourself, we get it. You should. But then what happens to a man when that woman doesn't? Because it's going to happen. So we have to deal with the fact, what should men do if we're talking about how men can keep themselves safe, especially from a woman that might hit you, because it might happen. It's not automatically going to stop tomorrow. I don't have a baton. Kay don't have a magic wand. And we sitting on the platform and say, women, don't you hit a man or you might get stumped out. And it's going to happen. And every woman is going to magically keep their hands to themselves. That's not going to happen. Dealing with reality means that if it were to occur, then what? What is the best situation for a man to put himself in if it was going to happen? Now, if a woman is going to hit you, you shouldn't be with that woman anyway. So that's a whole nother conversation. And why are you with a woman that would hit you? But let's just say this is her first time. Again, the conversation, and this conversation tonight is not, don't you put your hands on nobody. Like, okay, what if it happens? We have to deal again with reality. And I think this is what's missing, where we were trying to convey on the show, and it just seems to be lost in translation, which hopefully we'll kind of get there. But let me play a little bit more of our debut. I'm so mad because I watched them. I was like, why my debut gotta be this? You know? I was mad. I wasn't smiling, not a one time in the video. I was like, y'all, so this is the one that y'all want to. Okay, that's what's up. All right, let's see what they got to say. Let's see. And I'm just going to scan through it.
Put like a smaller woman in her place if she tries to hit him.
It's her duty to keep her hands to herself.
Hold
I agree with that.
on, wait, because I don't want Kay to misunderstand what the lead was saying. Kay, the way you started with the question, you said, "Are you saying that it's a man's duty?"
Right.
Exactly, Rilla. So that's a different question. That's why he was saying, "Don't put words in my mouth." Thank you, Rilla. That's a different way of asking. So you're saying,
like, Willie and I are
no,
actually
we're not.
listening to the words that are coming out of your mouth, even if you're not listening to them. Like,
Yeah.
I get very offended when people put words in my mouth because I choose my words precisely.
I feel you. I wasn't trying to put words in your mouth. I was saying, what do you think about that? Is
A
what
man should have the duty to make sure that he is protected at all times. At all times. And should allow no one to just walk around willy-nilly hitting him, whether or not he feels subjectively or objectively that person can or cannot hurt him.
Hey, Lead, I have a question. I have a question. So let's just take the dynamics of you and Kay. And Kay's 5'3", you're 6'3", a whole foot. And she hit.
I'm going to pause what I got to say because I'm going to bring somebody else on to this conversation. Someone that can give me a little bit better advice than us that has dealt with this for 13 years. What is poppin'? Nathan Daniel, our favorite police officer.
What's going on? What's going on? How you guys doing?
How are you?
I'm doing well. What's up, Kay? How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. So, what we are talking about is the clip of me and Kay that's going viral or something. I don't know, but it's discussing men hitting women.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're specifically talking about in defense. And Kay, the discussion kind of got very interesting amongst us all on the panel when first Kay came up with the idea, well, what if the woman is a foot smaller than you, 50 pounds lighter than you, what then? And of course, Kay, you can tell me what were you trying to convey in this particular show?
I was just wondering what people's thoughts were if, like what they think should happen if someone hits them, which we all know is wrong. No one should hit anyone. I'm going to just keep saying that throughout the stream. No one should hit anyone ever, regardless of size or threat or whatever. No one should ever hit anyone unless you are in danger, like, you really feel like fearing for your life type of thing.
Right.
But outside of that, if you walk up, I don't know, to someone and they're much bigger than you and you do something to them, I don't condone it at all. But if something like that happens, I was asking, like, what would they do, or what do they think should happen, or whatever, or what do they think about it? I guess I should say. I don't want to misquote anything. And I was just trying to see, like, does it matter if you're actually feeling threatened at all? Does it matter if you're actually hurt? Does it matter if you are, in a situation where that this person didn't hurt you, like, and then you retaliate in a way that's like unequal force? Like, I don't. Go ahead.
Let me do this because, I got some smoke in this too. So I want you to see my smoke, Nathan, and then if you can, give us your take as far as, what you've seen over the past like 13 years. So I tried to come up with an alternative.
All right.
Didn't go over too well. It did not.
What? And you're like, well, you hit me, I should be able to hit you back. What about an alternative? And I'm just asking of a restraint, since you're bigger, and grabbing her app and calling the police and saying she's right now hitting me. Come here and arrest her for assault.
Here's a problem I have. I'm sorry. Here's a reason why I hate when women say these things. Because you all, and I'm saying this, and I just want it to be relatable, and I'm going to explain why you can see this. You all want people to believe, understand, comfort you when you have been in a situation where someone may have taken advantage of you. This is a situation where women are taking advantage of men because women are doing these things because they know for a fact a man is going to be viewed a certain type of way if he retaliates.
Mm-hmm.
If he does that in a certain type of way, they know what it's going to be perceived as. So y'all are taking advantage of the knowledge that more than likely he's not going to hit you, not because he doesn't have the physical capability of, but he already knows he's going to receive from behind it. So y'all take advantage of that. But y'all want people to understand y'all's perspective, but y'all can't understand our perspective because listen to what she's saying. A woman hits me. Now I'm snatch her up. I'm hemming her up. I have both hands on her. I call the police. How the fuck am I doing it?
I know.
What am I doing with my toes? Like, if I'm trying to restrain her, I now as a man have to not only, it's my duty to restrain her and then find a way to fucking get to my phone, call 911, talk to them while I'm still, listen to what y'all are saying. And when women say that, it's so obvious that y'all have never been in that situation before. So it just becomes, it sounds so ignorant when y'all speak up on shit like that, bro.
There's been multiple times where women have been.
I'll pause him. All right. Officer Daly.
Yep.
First, what is your take on what you've seen thus far?
In reference to what Kay was saying or the video?
Yeah. So her asking the question, do you think that was a silly question for her to ask?
No, I don't think it's a silly question. I don't think any question is silly if someone's being genuine and why they're asking it, right? So I understand what both sides are saying. I think sometimes our words get lost in translation, right? I think that's kind of like the biggest problem when we talk about men and women having conversations about things. I think women have to understand that, you guys have certain leverages against men, right? I always tell people there's pros and cons for each gender, right? So you guys have certain leverages that men don't have. So society has created this concept over time, but this is fairly recent. It's fairly new. I think a lot of people don't realize that the whole concept of domestic violence is just kind of got started after the 60s. We're talking like 1970-ish is when the concept of domestic violence was actually coined. Prior to that, men were, they were disciplining their wives, right? So this wasn't uncommon. There was a tradition. There was a social understanding of respect, right? Women respected men. Women knew not to put their hands on men because it was an understanding that it wouldn't go well. And I think it wasn't until recently we just started seeing history change where society just kind of like, hey, man, if you want to be a real man, quote unquote, real men don't hit women. That's kind of the era that I grew up under in the 80s. That's how I was taught and raised. But what my parents told me was just that, no one should, again, just like Kay said, no one should be putting their hands on anybody. And if a woman hits you, you have a right to hit her back. That's kind of how I understood it growing up. But what did they tell us, though? That, of course, everything needs to be controlled, right? Men have a certain level of power. Biologically, we just have that power that women don't have. And so everything needs to be done within reason, right? So no one is condoning any violence on anybody else. But I think for Kay's point is like, at what point, how much is too much, right? So when you make statements like, oh, I'm gonna stomp her chest in or kick her down or whatever, like, okay, that's excessive. And that'll put you in handcuffs, right? And so again, the reality is there is a threshold where officers look at, okay, how much was too much? Okay, so you had a little spat back and forth. There was a verbal dispute. And then she decided to hit you and then you hit her back. Okay, I'm gonna show up and be like, I said, keep your hands to yourself, man. Off to jail you go, right? Because I'm looking for the primary aggressor. I'm looking for the person who initiated the contact. And not just always the contact, but sometimes who violated whose space, right? Who put this person in danger? So there's a multitude of ways to investigate a domestic, and it's not always who threw the first punch. A lot of times women find themselves in predicaments because their mouth tends to get them in more trouble. So then I ask questions, okay, what happened? How this whole thing unfold? And it's like, well, she was calling me this, calling me that. She said, my stuff's little. She said this and that. I'm broke. You know, I'm this kind of whatever kind of guy. And then so women don't realize sometimes when I'm talking to them, explaining to them that words have power, right? And so it's not always about physical force. You know, we're talking about the psychological, the emotional damage that women can cause with their mouth. And I think a lot of times we don't put emphasis on that. So again, you have a situation where you have a person violates another person's space. Then you have a person who actually physically makes contact with another person against that person's will. And then out of an emotional reaction, you have the man that hits the woman. And so, of course, after he's hit, then he hits her back. Then, I show up, I look at all the facts, I look at all the circumstances in its totality, and then I make a decision off of that. And what ends up happening is I look at a situation, okay, well, you hit her, or did you close her eye, right? Did you hit her, or did you take her teeth out? So of course, that's a charge, right? So there's a situation where you can actually take the act of violence over the top, and it become excessive, and you can actually go to jail for doing that. And so I've seen men who have been justified in their retaliation, I guess you would say, but they went overboard. And so when you go overboard as a man, what am I looking at? I said, sir, you don't have any self-control, right? There's no self-discipline. And I think what ends up happening is we start looking at this an emotional thing where there's an emotional issue with a lot of men who feel like they need to excessively go above and beyond to prove a point. Or how dare you put your hands on me? You know who I am. I'm a man, where ego starts to play a role in their action towards the woman. So that could be a slippery slope. So then what do I tell men? Avoid situations at all costs, because if you don't have any control, then you leave it up to, and I think this is Kay's point, you end up leaving it up to someone else to make the decision of your freedom, right? And that becomes a slippery slope as well, because again, who defines overboard? Well, the law does.
The police that show up at your house, right?
Yeah. So this is a question that I saw was a good question, I think. Who defines overboard? So what is
we have a thing called discretion. So the officers look at everything. Again, it's one would say it's common sense, but a lot of it is discretion. And here's the problem as a result to policing, is that all we need is the law to be on our side to actually enforce, making arrests. If we have what we call probable cause, that means we have enough evidence to support that this act was excessive. So one would ask, okay, a woman hits you, are you using the equal amount of force to address the situation, right? So if she punches you in the face and then you take a gun out and then you pull the trigger, is that appropriate level of force? So this is common sense, right? So if she punches you or she slaps you and she busts your lip and you decide to pick her up by the neck and choke her out, is that appropriate, right? So then if I show up and I'm like, I had a case, the perfect example, I had a case where the lady she was beating on him multiple times, hitting him, scratch him on his face. And he hauled off and hit her one good time. She fell back, she hit her head on the floor and she was unconscious. How hard did he hit her? So now I'm showing up and you have someone that we got to check whether or not she's still alive. He can't wake her up. So I said, okay, well, what did you do? What could you have not restrained her? Right? This is a question that we ask. What if she would have hit her head and then lost her life? Right? Would it have been worth it? Wouldn't it have been more worth it for him just to restrain his anger, right? Remove himself from the situation, call the police as he separates himself. Now, granted, people will say you have the right to do this, you have the right to that. Absolutely, absolutely correct. But if you can't control your anger, if you can't control the level of force that you're addressing the problem with, then you put yourself in a bad circumstance. And so no one is saying men should not address a threat. What we're saying is because we are more powerful and we do have a little bit of leverage when it comes to strength, you have to be careful on how you execute that, because the law is going to look at your level of force that you use to address the situation. And I'm going to give you a perfect example, and it's not domestic, but it's the dynamics between a man and a woman.
Mm-hmm.
You have a female officer and she stops the suspect on like a traffic stop. And we talk about, you guys mentioned it earlier, which I thought was really, 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 really great. The idea of fear and the concept of fear. The whole thing with fear, and you hear officers say, well, I was in fear for my life, right? Everybody has a different threshold of what fear is to them, because what makes me afraid might not make you afraid. So we have to be mindful of that. So if you have a female officer and she pulls somebody over, and that gentleman is 6'5" or whatever, he's 300 pounds, and she's 5'3" as an officer, her level of fear is going to be different than mine. Because if I pull him over, I'm not going to be afraid of him, right? And so what is she able to do in response to defending herself? Whereas if they look at me, they're going to like, hey, you can't shoot that guy. You guys are around the same height. Well, I'm not 5. I'm not that tall. But, 5'10", I'm struggling. I'm trying to get to 6. But they're still going to look at the dynamic and say, look, Nathan, you are you're this, you're trained, you're a man, he's a man. They're going to look at, did you use any other, did you use your hands? Did you use any other tools besides your gun? If I say I'm afraid of him, they're less likely to believe that. But if you have a woman who's 5'3" and she's trying to arrest a guy who's 6 foot tall, her level of fear is a lot higher than somebody else. And so all those things, all those factors, as officers, when we're investigating domestics, we take it in context. And as a man, I've told men before on another channel that you don't have to hit a woman to go to jail, right? And men need to understand this. When we talk about how men can protect themselves, they need to understand that you could damage property in the presence of a woman and put her in fear, reasonable fear for her safety, and go to jail behind that.
Yeah, I'm going to finish on the clip, but you had a show about that, didn't you?
Yes.
About someone going to jail and not even touching the woman.
Correct. It was a football player.
Right.
Yeah. What was he? Yeah, what was he? I'm not a big football fan. He
was, man, what did he do? It was on the Shade Room.
It was on the Shade Room. What was his name? He was was he? Now let me not say it because I'll make myself look back. So I don't know the team's name. He was what was his? Go ahead and play it. I'm gonna think about it.
Yeah, you think about that. let me play it. Let's figure out what I was trying to convey.
All right.
Even though they didn't like it. All right.
Well, I'll take your second point first. First of all, no one cares that women hit men. When you say legally on the books that she hits men, no one cares. She's not going to get punished for that. So that's not a deterrent at all. Second of all, if I restrain her, if I grab her wrist, it's going to be a mark. So guess what? We're both going to jail.
Oh, you're
so I am protecting myself, restraining her, doing what you say I should do. And then when the cops show up and see my fingerprints on her wrist, we're both going. And that's the best case scenario. Because
so then what should you do?
But hold on, Kay, let me finish.
What I'm saying is your solution is the best case scenario. What happens a lot of times is I could restrain her, the cops show up, they see bruises on her wrist, but they don't see any bruises on me. So now she's free and I'm going to jail.
Right.
And these same cops have probably been raised, especially down here in Georgia, under the assumption that men don't hit women regardless.
Yeah.
That's why it's all messed up on all.
What she asked the question earlier, what should you do? The answer is, I swear, it's always record, bro. That is the answer. Record. There's times where I was in a situation where I thought, like, there's no fucking way a soul will believe me that I'm in this situation. Let me pull out my camera and record. Yeah. And sometimes it's just a funny moment, like someone a cool trick with a fucking sign on the sidewalk. Yeah. But other times it's your life could be on the line. Or if it makes sense, record, bro. Because that's your proof. That's your proof. And catch evidence, dog. Don't just fucking willy-nilly catch evidence. Catch evidence, bro, so you don't look like a liar at the end of the day. The reality is, in a lot of these cases, assault, domestic, this, that, and the third, they're so difficult to prove. If more people recorded, there would be actual evidence that it did or didn't happen. You need to, bro, I couldn't stress enough how much I need to record more of your day, especially when shit is on the line.
You're restraining, you're talking about holding the wrist. Restraining could be a bear hug and telling her, you know what I'm saying?
Are you serious?
Why you guys breaking that?
Y'all gotta let me finish.
The bear hug thing threw me off.
Not let me talk.
Talk to me about the bear hug.
Okay, so I'm not even. That's just an idea.
Listen, you got mad because I cut you off at the bear hug. So fine, finish your point about the bear hug. I'm sorry I cut you off at the bear hug.
I'm trying to finish the sentence. So even with that, but if you hit her, being that you're a foot taller, you don't think that's going to be an imprint more than trying to constrain her, than fight her? And if she doesn't get anything on her, you don't get anything on her because she's not strong enough to do any kind of bruise on you, but you're able to bruise her when you fight her, and the police come, who getting arrested? The police, when they come, they're looking at who is more messed up.
All right, as a person who just recently got out of a boxing match,
All right, so what I was
that bear hug was funny.
I was just saying, okay, because I've never been in a situation before because I don't hit men, right?
Correct.
So I've never been restraint or anything. So the essence is, if you are a man, a bigger man, and if we fight and I push you and you hit me and I call the police and there's a bruise on me, even though I started it, my thinking is that the man is going to go to jail because I am the one that's bruised. When a police officer comes, he's going to look at who's hurt, who's bruised, who has, who looks the worst out of the two, because it's going from he say to she say. So it's upon the police officer to say, you know what, darn, you got a black eye. You said you was pushed, but there's nothing on you. Sir with the black eye, come with me. Or woman with the black eye, come with me. So that was my train of thinking, but it just seemed to get lost in translation. Like I was just saying something just illogical. And I'm like, well, is it really logical?
No, I go ahead, Kay.
Nate, like what Courtney just said, really points to something I was going to address that you said that I thought was a good point. If you have a certain response, it's really hard to gauge your level of force. If you're mad, if you're, infuriated, you're not going to be like, well, she kind of scratched me a little, so I'm just going to do something equal back. You're going to do something, and that for whoever, that could be men or women, it's hard to gauge your level of force. So that's why when it's a bigger man and a smaller, weaker woman, I just don't think it's worth going to jail over for an emotional response that you're having. Now, do I think, again, no, women should not hit men. Right. Men should not hit women. Everyone should keep their hands to themselves unless it is a true act of self-defense. But if you're in a situation and you're not hurt and you're not physically hurt and your ego is bruised, leave, and then press charges on the person later. Because how can you gauge how hard you're hitting someone when you're enraged?
Well, see, this is the problem with that logic, though. And so let me point out something. Because if it was that simple, nobody would be getting in trouble, right? We have to understand the power of emotion. And I think this is why emotions can be so dangerous if you have no control over them, right? So what you just said is perfect, right? It sounds good in theory, but in practice, what ends up happening? We're talking about a buildup of issues over a period of time between two people. We don't know what the issues are. It could be this person stepped out on the marriage, stepped out on the relationship. This person did something really trifling. I have stories. I can tell you stories for days. And these things will test your character, right? And so, we talk about how these domestics turn into people, being killed, right? Or being deleted or whatever ends up happening, where these violent situations come about because of built up emotions. And so what ends up happening, just to be very clear, is that you have people who are, after their constant debating or their disputes, the verbal disputes, something happens that triggers them. No one is thinking logical, right? That's the whole power of being lost in that emotional state of mind. This is where the crime of passion comes from. We're just so enraged, right? Because we always talk about rage and passion being so close together and kin, where it's hard to distinguish between the two. When you lose yourself because you're so angry, you get into this rage state. And so what ends up happening is you have whoever triggered who. And I think I saw somebody in the comments saying that I'm not speaking on what women do. We're not talking about what women are doing. We're talking about a man's reaction, you guys. It always bothers me when we have these conversations. If you get on one gender for too long,
it's always
what
like, about women?
Yeah, it's like, you guys, we got to be able to have these mature conversations, right? Mm-hmm. We know that there's men that do things wrong to women and women do things wrong to men. We're speaking to the men right now. We're not speaking to the women. So again, what is the issue is that when people lose themselves in an emotional state all the logic goes out the window, because common sense would say, hey, remove yourself from the situation, right? Common sense would tell a woman, don't get in this man's face when he's already angry and he's yelling. The common sense would say, women, don't put your hands on him, don't push him, don't spit on him, right? Don't throw anything at him, right? So these are things, there's a common, you know, he's angry. But what men are saying is that women have gotten to this place of comfort where they know that society looks at it as men aren't supposed to do that. And I don't know where that came from, right? Society should look at it as we should not put our hands on anyone, especially when a person's in an emotional state, because you don't know what their reaction is going to be like. There have been murder cases that I've worked where you have this bad volatile interaction, and the guy or the girl didn't mean to take it as far as they did, right? And so someone picked up a knife by accident. Someone threw the vase a little too hard. Someone pushed the person near the steps and they went over the banister. So these things happen. It's like, hey, I didn't mean to kill them, but it happened by accident because I couldn't control my temper. I couldn't control the rage of this emotion. And so again, it's not so simple. A lot of the reckless things I've seen men and women do to one another has always been in a high enraged state of passion, anger, resentment, right? This is what we're talking about. People who are so upset that they lose all logical understanding and they'll risk it all. I've seen women risk their whole career, risk everything, right? I've seen men risk everything. And so all because they could not calm themselves down and look at a situation objectively or remove themselves from a situation. And even like I said before, you know, this concept of domestic violence just started in the 70s. So before, this wasn't something that was talked about. And so this is still kind of new. So I think at the end of the day, the best thing, you know, the best advice I can give couples just in general, I always tell them, if you see the signs, you know, it's in your best interest not to agitate each other. Women don't agitate men. Men don't agitate women, right? There's things, we know each other's buttons. We know how to trigger each other. And I always tell people who think that it's, he said, be easy, chat. I got to look. We're talking about.
We knew this was going to be a fun one.
I mean, it needs to be said. And again, I tell men, you know, I've arrested plenty of women. And what that gentleman said about keeping evidence, the baby did it. And he was genius. He recorded the entire interaction he had with his child's mother. And he's absolutely correct to do that. Because again, a woman's power, she has leverage over the justice system. She has leverage in court. She has leverage over the police. You know, she can get into this state where she's like, oh, I'm so vulnerable. Look what he did to me. And then forget the part where she threw, drop kick, did spin cartwheels over his head. You know, she's not going to mention that. Right. And so even when we talk about restraining, right, when you talk about bear hugs and things like that, again, it's not always practical. Right. So I think you asked a good question. But I think what the men sometimes, again, once again, this is being lost in translation, is because men are saying, listen, we are upset. We're angry. Respect our anger. Respect our frustration. You know, no, we don't always want to just try to hug you, bear hug you, whatever. That's not practical. And where do we hear women get this information from? Television, you know?
I mean, well, Nathan, the thing that you're saying, I mean, I agree. Like emotions can, like I said earlier, you don't necessarily know how hard you're going to hit someone or what,
right?
Because you are caught up in your emotions, and that goes for men and women.
Correct.
So like with what you're saying right now, it's like, okay, women respect our, you know, boundaries, or the buttons, don't push them type of thing.
Right.
I get that. But like Courtney said earlier, we have to acknowledge reality. And again, I'm not advocating that anyone hit anyone. I'm saying in a situation, a domestic situation where a man is bigger and stronger and a woman is smaller and weaker, and she is having the exact same thing that you just said of being mad and not controlling her emotions, because men and women can lose control of their emotions. If you're the smaller person and someone else is the bigger person,
let me pause you right there.
I'm just trying to see like where we can't give that consideration to one party and not the other.
No.
I agree. No one should ever hit anyone. I'm gonna keep saying that
because this has nothing to do with height, size, or this is all about. And I think your position is coming from the dynamic, the physical dynamic But the way the law looks at it and the way society looks at it is, well, I won't say society, but the way the law looks at it is, we're looking at behavior. No one cares about size, height, different. You can have a man. You have some men who have a Napoleon complex. They're like 5 foot
So
tall, right?
if you're looking at behavior, though, then how is it automatically skewed towards women being or towards men being the aggressor? Like, how is that more? Like, if you show up on the scene, you said earlier that, like, if you see bruises and you use your discernment or something like that. If it's about behavior and not those types of things, then can you explain that?
Yeah, so it's not always about injuries. Injuries are just a piece of the evidence, right? So if I see a man who has scratches on his neck and the woman has nothing, or I see the woman have scratches on her neck and the man doesn't have anything, that doesn't necessarily mean he's the primary aggressor. You know, she could have attacked him in a way, and he could have grabbed her in a way to push her off, and then she got bruised because of it. So
I agree.
So the totality of everything that goes on in the situation is what we look at in order to actually investigate. So when I say discernment, he said discernment. When I say discretion,
I was like, come on now.
Okay.
Yeah, discernment. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So when we talk about discretion, it's based on whether or not an officer feels like the probable cause weighs enough to say, okay, this person should go to jail or these people should be separated. Like, I'm using my personal discretion that I'm actually looking at everything and saying, okay, this looked like it was something petty. They pushed each other. Nobody hit each other, right? They're calm enough. They're respecting each other. You know, I believe it's okay that we separate them and no one needs to go to jail, even though it's maybe mutual. And there's circumstances where I've taken both people to jail because I could not determine who started it, right? So I'm getting conflicting statements. Somebody's lying. Someone's not telling the truth, right? And the problem is, again, a lot of men go to jail behind damaging property in front of a woman, right? So that's something that's arrestable as well. So I would use my discretion and even those circumstances and say, okay, does this alert to the level where this person needs to be removed by force, or can they agree to leave the situation and we can keep the place peaceful? So everything, I'm looking at the totality of everything. What officers are looking at in these domestic investigations, who's the primary aggressor? Doesn't always mean physical, right? So again, I'm looking at a woman because a lot of times women lead with their mouths right before they lead with their hands. And so again, I say, okay, well, why were you following him around the house? He was trying to remove himself away from you. Why were you chasing him down around the house? Why were you insulting him? Why were you disrespecting? Those things matter because I'm looking at what is it that offends men? It's words, right? It's disrespect. So again, I'm looking at all those things because we're trying to determine what is it that incited this person to turn around and put his hands on you, right? If he went upstairs and you followed him upstairs, like, leave me alone, get out of my face, right? Because a lot of times the conversation starts with that. Get out of my face. I talk to guys all the time. I told her, get out of my face. Told her, get out of my face, right? And then she went back and got in my face and she nudged me and I pushed her and then she hit me. I didn't hit her back though. I didn't hit her back.
Oh no!
Conversation, and I asked her, well, did you?
You should have knocked out.
Yeah, well, and I say, okay, well, I'm listening to him explain it, and I'm like, okay. I talked to her, and she's like, no, he didn't hit me back. Okay, and I go back and I talk to him. I say, listen, I have enough. I can lock her up if you want. I said, tell me how you feel, right? Tell me what you think how this should turn out, and I'll ask the man what he feels like is best. And a lot of times, even when men are assaulted by women, they're like, nah, you don't got to lock her up. I don't want to take her. I said, well, I'm going to take her anyways, right? Because it raised to a certain level. Because if you retaliate, if I leave and then you decide to put your hands on her, someone else might not be so understanding. And so I always make it a point when a woman is in violation, she's gone. I throw the cuffs on her just as quick as I put the handcuffs on a man. I never take a woman's word for it. I go by the evidence. And I always explain to men that, listen, a woman is not going to give you that same type of courtesy. You know, and so I always make sure I'm fair.
So do people's stories count as evidence or?
Yeah, their stories are, and I make them fill out a statement, you know.
Okay, so you get like an official statement from each party.
Yep.
And then you go by that plus the other physical evidence you might see. So can I ask you a question about your experience?
Yeah, and then I'm going to ask also something. Okay, go ahead, darling.
Okay. No, I'm just curious in your experience, because I agree with what you said. If a woman hits somebody or does something out of line, they should get the same punishment. I am 100% with that sentiment and with that thought process. in your experience, you said, how long have you been in law enforcement?
13 years.
So in your 13 years, just from what you've seen and what you've heard in your, department, precinct, whatever, how balanced is it? Or like, what is the disparity between men getting in trouble and women getting in trouble in domestic calls?
Honestly, that'd be hard. It's hard to say. I mean, because there's different levels to a domestic situation. Sometimes they're just disputes. Sometimes they're physical. Sometimes they're deadly.
Let's say one that involves just something physical.
I would say it's hard to say. I'd have to, from my personal experience, I would say about half.
So then it doesn't lean to favor women?
You said when men favor women?
I said, so then it doesn't, you said it's about half, so it doesn't lean to favor women?
What do you mean favor? In what way?
Like it doesn't lean to say the woman is the innocent one and the man is the aggressor? If it's about half, then I'm just trying to see, because a lot of people think that as soon as I thought,
yeah. Well, I understand what she's saying, but let me ask you maybe another way.
Okay.
When you're going out on a domestic dispute between a man and a woman, have you seen it, not saying you, but maybe your fellow officers, where it's been more biased towards the woman?
Oh, okay. Sometimes, but it depends on the situation. A lot of times it's when a woman exaggerates. Oftentimes you have women exaggerate situations to try to skew the investigation, right? So a lot of the issues that I've seen with women is that they over exaggerate, right? And so you could take a situation where it's like, okay, well, he did this or he said that, or it's almost kind of like it's hard to explain, but I would say that a lot of it is just based on exaggeration. They over embellish certain situations. And then when you really break it down, or I had a situation, perfect example, I had a situation where it was recorded. They had a domestic outside of a daycare, right? And she stated that he punched her in the face while she was holding the child. And so I said, okay, now I don't take a woman's word for anything, right? I look at all the evidence, and this goes for women and men. And so again, you can make a statement, but then when you see the truth, it's like, well, did he really punch you? It looked like he pushed your shoulder, man. This is different than getting punched in the face, right? So this is the problem that I see with a lot of women sometimes, is that they exaggerate a situation to try to make themselves look more like a victim. And so that is how, when I say women try to use law enforcement, use the courts, they use that. They fall on they lie, right? They'll lie. And it's the best way to say it. They either exaggerate something, grossly exaggerate something, or they flat out lie because they know that the law is going to be more willing to believe their story than they will believe a man initially, before looking at the evidence. Right. And that's some officers. That's not all of us, but there are cases where women have manipulated a story in order to get a favorable outcome. So, yes, that is true.
Yeah. Let me say this, because I, again, wanted to talk about this for two reasons. One, to kind of dissect this and show more context to what has been seen with the playback. And then the other guy that did it. Kay, let me pull this man up. Then I was like, come on, again, like it's over 200K, man.
He said, let's pull this man up.
Man,
I'm not even gonna he does reviews over rap music, I think.
I don't know. All I know is that I was called all kind of dumb and stupid on his reaction. I was like, well, that was hurtful. But here's the thing. Again, I wanted to talk. I said that was my first goal. And then the second goal is to really talk about with domestic violence. But I wanted to have a truthful conversation. These YouTube streams are, to me, becoming like a mega church where the pastor is Joel Osteen and he's just saying what you want to hear. So when we have these reaction videos that are making up stuff that we did not say, Kay never said a woman can hit a man ever. But we're pandering to what men are wanting to hear because they're tired of the foolishness. I get the tiredness of it, but when are the real conversations going to be had where it's like, look, when a woman hits you, I get it. Yes, it would be right if you can hit her back, but double standards exist. And if we're not talking about these double standards and we're putting these shows where thousands of people are watching and are saying, yeah, hit her, knock her out, stump her, and whatever,
Crazy.
you going to jail.
Yeah.
Not one person on these or even in the comments said anything about going to jail, said anything about, yeah, okay, pound on her just because she might have hit you first. It's still consequences. So again, what we're talking about is not if a woman hits you, should you have the right to hit you back? Yeah, you should have the right. However, there's going to be a consequence with that right when you try to hit her back as well. So I want to have a real honest conversation of what happens. So Nathan, if a woman hits a man, what should he do?
That's hard to say because I'm gonna be completely honest. We're gonna have a real conversation. You know, not all men are created equal, right? And I think we just have to be honest about that. So, you know, I can't speak for other men. What I will say is I've seen men who are very successful, men who aren't successful at all, men who are bottom feeders at the bottom of the barrel in society, who make more responsible decisions in domestic situations than men who are of I guess you could say high value, right? Everybody's different. Everybody's different. I think this is a moral question. You know, what does it mean to you? I think all men operate with a certain level of morality or a certain code of ethics that they live by. I have my own code. It might be different than somebody else's code, right? Some people have a code where they can turn the other cheek and some do not.
Well, let's take morality out of it. And I want to get Sir Hill when he said, you know, men are not talking about jail because it's something we already know. Apparently not. Because it's not being talked about. On our panel that we were on the network, on the playback of this other gentleman, Night Talk, that are almost the total is almost 500,000 views. And not a one person in there said you might go to jail.
It's all like Courtney and Kay aren't holding women accountable. And it's just like we have said 1,000,000 times, don't hit anyone. No one should. Keep your hands to yourself. And it's funny, Courtney, like even in the comments, people are still saying like, well, why aren't they telling people to keep their hands? We have said this.
Well, the comments, the people are gonna be the people. Like I said, this space has become a mega church. And if I'm not Joel Osteen feeding what you want to hear, and I'm saying something that might make you feel uneasy, then it's not the comments are going to reflect it. So I get it. But this has to be said. People don't know that they might go to jail. They might say, well, it's in self-defense. She hit me. Okay.
No, men know. See, that's the difference between men. I think men and women. Men are well aware of the consequences of their actions in life. They do it. They do things. I have conversations with them. And, you know, again, some men are willing to risk it all. They don't care. It's more of a respect thing. And again, there's a difference, right? I always say there's a difference between men and boys. This is the best way to put it, right? Men do what they need to do. Boys do what they're allowed to do. And that's the difference. At the end of the day, that's the difference. Everything comes down to maturity, right? My thing is, why I'm the type of person, I get to the root of the problem, right? Why am I associated with a woman that's not going to respect me? Why am I associated dealing with a woman who I have to feel at risk that she's going to be or has the capability to try to put her hands on me? I don't even associate with those type of women at all, right? Because I have too much to lose. So again, the conversation goes back to, okay, what type of women are we picking? You know, and if we really want to get down to it, not putting the blame on men, I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that at all. Reality, if we're talking about women, I say the same thing to them. You picking this guy who's abusive. You're with him. I've been at multiple homes, the same home over again over the same issues about a man being abusive. Why are you in that relationship? I hear women give me all kind of excuses why she can't get away or why she can't separate herself. So again, the conversation goes both ways. You pick that partner, right? So if you're dealing with an abusive person, we know there's a psychological thing. We get it. I get it. The reality is, if it's an abusive thing, you don't like what you're dealing with. You need to remove yourself out of the relationship. To me, it's just that simple. So what we're talking about when we see recurring, repetitive domestic issues in the same household, you have two people in a toxic relationship. Period. If a woman puts her hands, if I show up and the evidence shows a woman hit the man and assaulted him, I take her to jail every single time. Every single time. If there's no physical evidence, then I ask her to leave the house, even if she lives there. Well, you need to go to your auntie's house, go to your mom's house, but you can't stay here tonight, or I'm taking you to jail. And that's the way I solve it, because the issue is all about liability for me, and sometimes less about them.
Okay. I'm going to play this because, again, this was something, Kay, that you said I thought was interesting on the show. If it plays.
They are beautiful. Yeah, go ahead, Kay.
Can I ask a question before it's burning me up inside.
Okay, who's the question for?
Just in general. So something that I noticed during the whole talk, because I think there was just a lot said within the last maybe 20 minutes. The last topic was about have men been or taught how to protect themselves against women, right? So the thing that I thought about while we were all talking, everyone was sharing their points of view, and Courtney brought up something about like how to respond if a woman hits you or whatever. I absolutely think that women should not be hitting men. I've never hit a man. I'm not going to. But we know that in the observable reality of the world that sometimes women will hit men. We also know that we kind of touched on last time TLA was on the show about judges and how there's different bias as it looks to women versus men, right? So if we know this, we know there's this bias in terms of women versus men, and we know that a man got hit by a woman and he wasn't hurt, wouldn't part of giving him tools to protect himself be stay out of prison, you're not even hurt? Like, and yes, I know women should never hit men. I agree with that 100,000%. But if you, like TLA, if I push you, you're not going to beat me to a pulp because you know.
I will. TLA is nice.
Okay, I'm not talking to you.
I'm a stomp you out. I'm a stomp you out. I'm going to do all of that.
Okay.
Call me when y'all get off of this. Call me when y'all get off this subject, bro.
While Anton said that,
Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry. I will never condone hitting a woman. I don't care how.
Okay,
You're going to get stomped out right next to her.
Okay, so point.
You and her together going to be getting stomped out. Oh, yeah, you are.
Okay.
I'm going to be stomping your face off, and then I'm going to go right back to her, and I'm going to be kicking her.
Okay.
What?
I don't understand how any of my where did Courtney go? Oh,
Like,
I remember for 3 seconds.
Okay, so that was a lot.
How was anything that I said wild at all?
So, but that didn't get clipped up either. It was just saying something that we didn't say. And again, I think this is what we're trying to convey. And again, this was a whole hours of a discussion. If we know that there's biases that happen, prime example, me and Kay talked about this. If I had a black son and he's out, hoodie on, driving car, he's 16, 17 years old, and he gets pulled over, I'm already going to equip him on what could happen. Not that police is wrong, and if he's wrong, you tell him that he's wrong and that you have rights. No, I want you to come home first. We'll deal with whatever happens, but I want you to come home first. So if we have if we have that to our black boys, because we know what could happen, and we're moving in that space where it's the police officer bet not, the police is racist. Like, we get it. But if we're moving in a space where it's the focus is coming home, the focus is not going to prison, the focus is that you're safe. And if we're looking at that as men, what can we do to protect men? And if my focus really what was as harmful as I could be, but try to have an alternative, K as well too, is that we want you to come home and let's do things to make sure of that, especially if we know there's a bias. What the hell is wrong with that? Like I that's what I guess I'm missing.
That's like it's part of the equipping someone with tools, knowing how things actually are sometimes. I know, Nathan, that you said it's kind of 50-50 in your observation, but I always thought that things were, that women were given more of a consideration in terms of domestic disputes. But I mean, like Courtney said, we should be, I think, pushing what's smartest. If you're not hurt, that was the biggest thing. Now, if you're hurt and you're like, fearing and you really think, whatever, okay. But if you're not hurt,
but the law doesn't, that's the thing. The law doesn't look at whether or not you're hurt or not, right? The law does look at the level of damage, and the way the damage is broken down into this type of category. Visible signs, right? The inability to use a particular body part, or the damage was rendered on a person to an extent to where it could have caused severe bodily harm or death, right? So those are the three main categories. But then there's a portion where you can also threaten a person. So you never touch them at all. You can threaten a person and go to jail behind that. So when we talk about men protecting themselves, what is the best advice that I'm telling what I give young men on the street? I tell them remove themselves out of toxic situations, remove themselves. Men know what type of women they have, right? Let's not get it twisted. Men know. We stay because the sex is good. We stay because we probably, we're insecure, can't find another woman, whatever it might be. But the reality is we stay for reasons that aren't worth risking our freedom over. Okay. I've seen it all the time. And another thing I want to touch on about the comment that Anton made, right? So I don't know why he said that, but what it came off to me is that, listen, if a woman hits me, I'm stomping her chest in. And if you as a man decide to come to her rescue, I'm stomping you out too. That's not a message that we want to preach and push in YouTube. Again, these platforms that we have are very, very sensitive. Again, making a statement like that gives the wrong message. At no point in time are we ever condoning men to stomp a woman's chest in. Unless your life is in danger as a man, I don't care what. Again, we're not talking about the size of a woman. Those things are irrelevant. I've seen women who are shorter than me, women who are 5 foot, whatever. If they have a knife or a gun in their hand, they're just as dangerous, right? If they hit you as a man over the head in a certain spot, they're just as dangerous as anybody else. Size has nothing to do with this, right? Has nothing to do with this. So again, we have to be careful, because one would even argue, I don't know if he has any kids or not, but say he had a daughter and his daughter was involved in a situation where she felt, for whatever reason, she needed to put her hands on another man. And that man had the same mentality as he did and say, I'm going to stomp her chest in. So my thing is, would you be okay about that? As a father, if you had a daughter, would you be okay with another man stomping her out simply because she slapped you in the face, right? Again, so we have to be careful when we put that. I know a lot of times this stuff is for entertainment. I get it, but this is domestics. We're talking about domestics. This is serious. People lose their life behind it. People lose their freedom behind it, behind making one bad choice. A lot of men don't know the laws. And so when we talk about protecting men, it's okay, men, what do you need to do? Because unfortunately, the court system is weighed a little bit against you. Women have a little bit more leverage against you. So what do you do? Because if they're going to take a woman's word over yours in a situation where there's confusion and chaos, what are they going to say, right? The best thing a man can do is remove himself, document as much as he can. If he knows he's going into a volatile situation with the woman, record. Put the record on. I've had women make lies, just saying that this man threatened to take my life, and had recorded and say, I never said that. Here's the recording, officer. So what do? I took her to jail, right? You wrote this whole statement. You made up this whole fictitious story about how this man threatened to take your life. And then I sit down with you in handcuffs and we're having a conversation and then you tell me that you lied. So this is how fragile a man's freedom is in the court system. Men have to be careful. So the reality is, yes, as a man, you have to be mindful if you're going in a situation. But again, men pick the situations as well. They stay in situations too. And this also goes for women. Women pick the men that they're with. They also stay in toxic relationships as well. So it goes both ways. But in this case, we're talking about how do we protect men? The advice I give them is remove themselves. When you see these red flags, you have to be, you got to be honest with yourself. And if you stay in a situation because you're having some certain benefits that you like and you weigh those things over your freedom, then the court is going to make the final judgment. And if you put yourself in a situation and an officer shows up, then you're now putting the responsibility and you're playing Russian roulette with your freedom. Mm-hmm. And that's just the reality of it, whether people like it or not. Men, whether you like it or not, doesn't matter. If you put yourself in a situation where someone has to show up at your house and make the decision for you, that's on you. And that's also part of being a responsible man. That's part of the reality of being a man. And so the best thing we can do is not put ourselves in uncompromising positions.
Thank you for that, Nathan. What's going on, Sir Hale and Uncle Stu? How are you guys?
Doing
Good.
well. You know,
All
my inside joke, I see certain content creators are running from Uncle Stu. Hey, Kate.
I'm not running.
You're running. I survived Kate. She ain't coming from Uncle Stu's territory.
I'll get it together, Uncle Stu.
All right. Appreciate you. But Nathan, I want to kind of challenge you on something. Mm-hmm. Here's the challenge. What does a man do when he has children and he's in an environment where he can't get away because there's no place to go? And the reason I challenge that is because it's definitely on the platform. I've been in that position. I had children. I had nowhere to go. I don't think I just purposely said, hey, knock me the heck out. I mean, it didn't happen that way. But in that same breath, I don't feel less. I don't feel like no punk or no weakling. It was the fact that my dad was a cop, and I've always said this. He taught me how to protect a woman, but not from a woman. And when you got a society that doesn't even believe that happens, there is no shelter system. There is no social service system. Nope. There is nothing for him to go. And picking up that phone might mean my life over her life. Yep. So it's easy to say, well, you got a job, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this. But until you're in that position, you really don't know. And that's the problem. You said weak, and I'm saying, wait a minute, what about, because I think more men stay, not because of what's in between their legs. I think they stay more because of those kids, especially when one of them is biologically mine, not hers, and there's no protection in the system. And I'm in a whole different state and city, so I don't see you coming to my house. You understand? I mean, I'm just being honest. Right. Now things may have changed, and I'll be glad to hear about the change. No, the issue is there's domestics are very difficult to unravel because there's so many variables. Mm-hmm. There's so many variables, and everything matters because, I mean, we can dive into legitimacy of the children. We can talk about who gets the rights to the kids. There's it gets deep, right? Because I'm gonna look at you and say, I hear you say you're the dad, but what you got on paper? Did you sign the birth certificate? Right? Yeah. Where's the court order? Right? So women have leverage, and this is the reality. And sometimes men have to take a walk and come back and fight with the courts to get listen, you guys, it's unfortunate. I didn't make the rules. Right. You know what I mean? I didn't make the rules. I don't agree with how the court is set up. It's unfair and it's not balanced to support men. Men can't just walk out and be like, oh, let me go to this shelter place for men who've been kicked out of their home from a domestic. I haven't seen one out here in Atlanta. So again, we don't have the same luxuries. So what do you tell a man who's in a bad situation? You better calm down. You better calm down. See, we can talk about what's fair and we can talk about what the reality is.
So we can make a moral argument. Yeah, we can make it all day. But if a man in this day and age, if you don't have self-control, if you don't have self-discipline over your actions, your words, your behavior, your third leg, however you want to put it, there's consequences for men. That's just the reality. That's what I was taught. And that's also what I've seen. Men who lack self-control have issues, right? If you're not disciplined as a man, you have issues. If you don't know how to control your mouth, you have issues. If you think you can go here and say this and say that to anybody you want to, you can't do it as a guy. And men understand that. Some understand it and don't care. Some understand it and they struggle. Again, men do what they need to do and boys do what they're allowed to do. So again, we're talking about maturity. This all breaks down to maturity. What happens, Uncle Stu? You're in a relationship with someone and there's domestic in the home and you guys have kids. You better hold your cool.
Right.
It's not fair. It's not fair. But what's the reality?
Right. Let me ask you this. Do you think, and this is the last question, then I'm gonna let y'all go. Do you think there's not enough conversation?
Absolutely.
Because I find that there's a lot of ignorance. You know, I've ran into it where it's like, oh, you just this type of person. It's like, really? You have no clue that the number is higher than a 5%. It's actually at almost 49. It's almost 50-50. It's not allowed to be reported or talked about.
Men don't do it. Men don't talk about. I've worked plenty of cases where men refuse to press charges, and I take the woman anyways to jail. You guys, I'm an equal opportunist. I feel like if you buy the ticket, you get the whole damn ride for me. That's how I operate, and I do that because I understand how women can lie, and they've lied on men. And I will tell men this: hey, listen, this situation, she's guilty. You know, I'm gonna take her to jail. Nah, bro, you don't got to do that. No, I have to do it because this is how you create accountability. This is where the discipline piece comes in because I'm dealing with women who can't discipline their mouth when they're talking to men, right? I've watched this man run around his own home to avoid this woman. Ultimately, then she gets him to a point to where he ends up having to push her off, and then she hits him back, right? And then she wants to call the police and say, hey, I'm mad because of what he did to me last week. This has nothing to do with tonight, right? This has nothing to do. So you've risked this man's job, his freedom, because you didn't like what he said to you last week. You've held on to this. You want answers and you want it now. This man is trying to calm down and trying to remove himself from the situation. Ma'am, you're going to jail.
Let me because I want to get Sir Hale and then I'm going to get Tommy B. But let me put this up real quick because I was wondering too, a lot of the reasons why men don't report it or it doesn't get talked about by men when a woman hits them. And I found this kind of interesting. Let me see. Let's see if I can pull it up. If it does it today. All right. So some of the reasons why men don't say nothing, don't speak about it. One, they're embarrassed. Many men are ashamed of being abused, unable to stand up for themselves, or have failed in their job as a man, husband, or father. Religious views. Some men don't want to disclose domestic violence against them because their religious beliefs require them to remain in the relationship. There aren't enough resources. Like we talked about Uncle Stu and Nathan. Many men fear the authorities would not believe them, that their abuse will be reduced because they're male, or that there'll be little services available, i.e., I guess different places for them to go to leave the house to support abused men. Same-sex relationships. Other reasons why males don't report domestic abuse is that they may be in a same-sex relationship but haven't told their family or friends because they're frightened their partner will out them. I think there was a couple more. They're in denial, denying that the relationship was a problem will just prolong the abuse. And 6, wish to keep the children safe. Again, Uncle Stu, this is what you stated, for the children. Another reason why men don't report domestic violence is that they want to keep their children safe. Men are concerned that if they leave, their spouse would injure or deny them access to their children. Obtaining custody of children is usually difficult for fathers. But even if they are confident in their ability to do so, they may feel overwhelmed by the possibility of raising their children alone. So again, these are legitimate things that you even talked about, Uncle Stu and Nathan, that it doesn't go reported. Men don't say anything. A man, the police come to the house, and men is like, oh, okay, no, we're cool. I don't want to press charges. I don't want to get a restraining order. And those are just 6 reasons of why, but those are valid concerns. I definitely think so.
I would say real quick before Sir Harris gets in there is number 6 is one of the biggest ones that I've come in contact with men who have children. In reference to your point too, Uncle Stu, I've seen all of them are valid. All of them are valid. A lot of times men have been assaulted and they never put their hands on the woman and it's verifiable and all that. A lot of it is pride because men are taught that, we're just supposed to just be a punching bag. Like we're just supposed to take it because we're men. And I'm like, nah, I don't agree with that. I'm taking her to jail. Right. Because this is the problem. I don't even know where that even came from. Right. The notion should be no one should be touching nobody. That's what needs to be understood throughout society, period. Right. So this whole I'm gonna stump your chest in if you hit me. Nah, sir, you're going to jail. And I'm gonna do it with a smile. Right. I have taken people talk about religious reasons. That's a big issue too. I've seen men and women who stayed in marriages, getting the brakes beat off of them in their marriage, staying because the Bible told them so. And I say, show me the scripture, please. Right. And so again, I've showed up, I don't want to call no names out, but I've showed up at a church out of frustration. Guys, I'm a Christian, and so when I see certain things, especially when we have religious leaders who do certain things, I've showed up at the church to arrest the pastor. And I didn't know he was a pastor.
I'm sorry to say, I was thinking the same thing. Like, oh, you
back in the day.
Back in the day. Well, it's funny. I was actually a part of that case with him when he had the situation with those young boys. And the reason why he didn't go to jail was because those boys were of age. So, the legal wise, if you're over the age of 16, it's not, so no one said, right? So anyways, with this particular case, I showed up at a house and I didn't know he was a pastor, but there was a lot of religious stuff in the house. And it was the neighbor who called the police, right? Knew about this abuse that was going on. She never mentioned anything simply because of the religious thing. She didn't want to embarrass him and things of that nature. But he closed her eye up. He closed her eye up. They said, hey, First Lady's out on sabbatical. No, she's trying to recover from this retina injury. And so I said, oh, really? He's a pastor. What church does he work at? Right. And so I secured the warrant and I went on a Sunday after first service and I waited outside out his car. And so as the congregation was coming out, he had the nerve to ask me. He said, oh, officer, please, if you could just not do it in front of my people, and it made me sick to my stomach. And I said, no, the people need to see who their pastor is. I need you to put your hands behind your back. I said, don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. And I was prepared to put him on the ground if need be. And he politely turned himself behind his, put his hands behind his back. And I cuffed him and I gave him the walk of shame, walked him up around down the corner and brought him back down and put him in the car.
Yeah, he's just being petty.
Sir Hale, a little petty.
Hale, what you got for us? That's just petty.
Petty.
He went straight petty. I'm gonna drop off the stream.
Okay.
I'm gonna be in the chat. Thank y'all. Salute to y'all.
Shout out Uncle Stu. Appreciate it.
Nathan Daly, write this day down. I survived K. Being that she running from me, I survived K.
I'm not running. I'm not.
All right, y'all have a good night.
You too.
Hey, shout out to I am Courtney. Good to see you. Kay, good to see you as well. The real Nathan Daly. What's up, my man? And what's up, Tommy B? So listen, I came up for 2 reasons. One is because of what I said earlier. We often say that men need to be told something about why we shouldn't hit women. We know this on 3 different levels. There's a 4th, but I'll only talk about 3. On an instinctual level, most men know that we're protectors by nature. So on an instinctive level, on a social level, we're taught, hey, you man up. She's a weaker vessel. And then on the legal level, we know if we do something, we're gonna feel the brunt of those consequences. I don't think that men we have to keep on letting people know that there are consequences for their actions. Absolutely. But we really need to start culturing our women to understand that they can't use their femininity and use that in a way that they can get away with violence and then jump back into their femininity and then get away with it. Like one of the things that I heard Kay, and while I respect Kay and I respect the way that you think, like the logic that you use to say why a man who is bigger and stronger should have some restraint should also be that same logic that's employed for women to say because he is bigger and stronger. And
I agree with that. I agree with that, Sir Hale.
Even if he's not bigger and stronger.
I agree with. I said no one should hit anyone before. I just don't want this to be.
I just want to finish this point real quick. I just want to finish this point real quick.
I don't like when people like allude to me saying things I do.
Let him finish.
Yeah, I just want to finish this point. And I'm not alluding. I've heard this on the actual show and on this one as well.
And on the actual show, I said no one should hit anyone.
Okay.
Yeah. So you absolutely did. And after you said that, you said but. And then your but came in that if a man is this, and then you proceeded to suggest these different circumstances that because he's bigger, he's stronger, his freedom is on the line, all these good things, that he should have some restraint, which you are correct. But it's always this but when we talk about how men should restrain themselves.
You said I was correct.
So while this is true, we should culture our women in two different areas. Keep your hands to yourself because maybe you're not going to get that understanding. Because there's some guys out here who don't give a care about their freedom. You mess them up the wrong way. You say the wrong thing. That's it. It ain't no I'm protecting black women. You ain't gonna get that because they've experienced this long enough and they don't feel that same respect or that same care, or they just don't have that particular care and concern for their own life. So I think we got to have that conversation because most men know it's our sisters who need to know. That's what I want to come up here and say.
I want to piggyback off of what you just said, Sir Hale. I think the problem is we have some women if we're talking about our community, or some women in our community that live, I don't want to make sure I filter this properly.
Go ahead, say what you got to say, Nate Dogg.
All right.
Be blunt about it.
Some women are a little bit delusional, and they live in a state of delusion. And what Sir Hale is saying, he's absolutely correct, because what ends up happening, you try the wrong guy who doesn't care about your personal beliefs, because this has nothing to do with your personal beliefs. It has everything to do with respect, right? And so if we just really talk about the truth, the root of the matter is all about respect, has nothing to do with a man, woman, body size, none of that. There are some men who don't care. They don't care, and it's all about respect and principle. And, what happens is you see men who take a higher threshold of position and say, ma'am, you don't know any better, but if you caught me 5 years ago back in the day, I'd have knocked you through the roof, right? And so again, it's by the grace and just the patience of some men who have the patience of a monk that decide not to put their hands on women when a woman puts their hands on them. And I think what ends up happening is there's a sense of comfort that a lot of women have, thinking that they can do and say certain things and that there are no consequences. And that's not true. And again, I've worked cases where it's like, oh, why'd this happen? Well, she said this and said that. I was like, watch what you say to people. People are willing to go to jail and spend a week in jail, and they'll knock your tooth out of sheer satisfaction that they had a chance to shut you up. So again, I tell women when I show up and I see a woman laid out bleeding because she said something real disrespectful to anyone, right? Man, woman, anybody. Again, there's a sense of self-discipline we all need to have as a people, just in general, when we're addressing other people. Be respectful to one another. You don't know what level of violence a person is willing to take a situation. Just the other day, you had a guy shooting outside of his window because somebody swerved around him in a car. He took his gun out and started shooting out the window. And this is a road rage. People die from road rage, you guys, because you cut me off. Now I want to take your life. People escalate things. So again, I tell people all the time, watch your mouth, watch the behavior, keep your hands to yourself. And, the world will be a better place, right?
Yeah. And I think what Kay was trying to convey is, I don't know if it was more of using femininity. It was because she referenced in the video, she wouldn't hit a kid. So I think that she was maybe kind of conveying, would you exert aggression towards a weaker vessel?
But can I push back on that? And that's what I wanted to challenge, because women who can be aggressive often want to revert back to the esteem and the protection of children when they're taking adult behaviors.
Okay, well, let's do elderly. So if you were working in a nursing home and there was a little white man that said, "You nigger," and just sucked you in the stomach, knowing it didn't hurt, the little thing got Bell's palsy, just going in, would you sock him back?
Well,
I think this reframes this is reframing the entire.
But this
the whole thing
is where I think this is what her logic is saying, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, Kay, is that look at the fight. Look at who you are going to hit. If it's mano a mano, I think, again, Kay, this is what I'm getting from you. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Let me follow up on that, because I know exactly what Kay is saying. Kay is saying if you as an individual, right, you are in a place of maturity and you're like, I'm a bigger person. She's asking, are you going to be the bigger person? You know, and we're talking bigger as you're going to make the mature decision. You know that you're bigger, you're stronger, or you're younger. This person's older with the cane, right? And they're like, are you really this person mouthed off of you? They said something disrespectful. The old man called you a bad word. Because you know you're in a better position physically, mentally, even mature wise. Are you going to, this person had a mental health issue, are you going to beat up on this person because they've been diagnosed, they have a mental health problem, they're diagnosed with it, you know this is true. They did some, the question is, the problem with the whole argument,
so many layers.
No, I know, but here's the issue. It's right, you're dealing with someone that you know, right, is deficient in an area. Are you going to take it back? My thing is, this is the problem with the whole argument, using these different little analogies, right? Here's the issue. The reality is, you don't know. Some people care and some people don't. So as an individual, men and women have to understand is, it's not what you think, right? It's about how the other person feels. So this has nothing. We can never define it, because people are different. Everybody's level of maturity is different. Everybody's level and threshold of respect is different. And what pisses me off is not going to piss you off. And so if you try something on me, you might get a different reaction. I might let it slide because I have a lot of self-control and I don't really care, right? Words don't bother me. But someone else will stump your chest in, right? So again, it has nothing to do with size. It has nothing to do with whether a person's willing to lose. It has everything to do with the person's character and their personality. When you are interacting with people, you don't know them. You don't know what they're willing to do. It's Russian roulette. And this is what I'm saying. This is what separates a person's level of aggression. One, you bump into somebody in the store and they're ready to take your life if you don't apologize. And you bump into somebody else in the store and they accept your apology. We see it all throughout society. People are losing their life because of petty arguments. We see it in our community all the time. We have people who struggle with the ability to successfully have conflict resolution. They don't communicate. We have people who are hyper emotional, hypersensitive. You can't say nothing to them. And so again, the issue, Kay, is that those things are non-factors when it comes to dealing with people and their personality.
I got one more response to this, and then I'm done. Courtney, first of all, thank you for putting the show together. Like this, I had to take a breath. I had to go get some water, come back for this one. So here's the other thing. The other problem that I had is when you start to say things like that, it was the statement. And Kay, let me say, I get where you're coming from. Like, I appreciate you thinking through this, so I get where you're coming from. But there's a lot of other people who haven't thought through all of this, who are not as thoughtful. Right. And when we say things like, if somebody hit you and it didn't hurt, in the context of relationships, this is why people end up getting deleted, because they took something, it didn't hurt at first, and they kept on taking it. And we know when it comes to domestic violence, it gets worse after time. Right. And that's what I wanted. I want to bring that up, because that it doesn't just happen to women, it happens to men as well. So that's my contention. Let me go get a breath of fresh air. This has been an interesting conversation.
Well, I'll respond to what you're saying. When you leave, you don't care.
I do want to hear. Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because I just, so I get that. People shouldn't be hitting anyone, as I've said multiple times. I'm just saying, in terms of keeping people out of jail, that's all I was trying to say. If you're a man and you know that if they come, you're going to be the one that goes. What am I supposed to say? Well, it don't matter if you go or not. Get your revenge. how responsible would that be of me to say? Now, I understand, like I said earlier, that you never know what someone's response is going to be. You hit people at your own risk. That absolutely is true. I'm just saying, in a situation, if it's between going to jail or not, don't. If you are not feeling threatened and you're not actually injured or hurt, just leave. That's
Let me
all
respond to that.
That's
I
all
got
I'm
you. So
saying.
now let me tell you what changed my mindset. And Talk Hill, if you're watching this, let's listen. I want to let's talk to our therapist after this. Listen, I dealt with a situation with a young lady, and she was interesting. I won't use the word crazy, but she was interesting, and she was a very emotional individual. That's a good term. She was a very emotional individual, and so we got into an argument. We got into an argument. I said, you know what? I'm about to leave. She stands in front of the door so that I couldn't leave. In that situation, my freedom flashed before my eyes. Here's my thoughts. If I try to physically move her, that's assault. If I touch her in the wrong way, she could say it's sexual assault. I didn't know what to think. This is what a lot of men deal with. And when I hear you say things like this, you start off by saying people shouldn't hit people. Well, men are part of those people as well. And so if we're going to assign a certain level of information for guys, my question to you is, why aren't we teaching more of our women not to put men in these predicaments, to show that same respect? If we talk about we're people and we're culture and we're community, then why are we telling our women not to put our men in these predicaments to feel like they have to protect themselves and then using the system as a way to get back at them when violence occurs? Men know this. If you listen to the great comics, listen at movies, look at culture, we know that if we do something, we go into jail. It's our sisters who don't know. That's who we need to be having this conversation with.
So, I will always say that no one should hit anyone. I've said women should not hit men. I've said that multiple times. I think like the question that you asked, I think that the reason that it's often more skewed to like having men as the audience is because men are the ones who I thought would be more likely to get in trouble even if they weren't in the wrong. So like to just kind of avoid that, I think that's why, for me at least, the conversation goes that way. But I definitely think and will always say that women should keep their hands to themselves. You should not hit somebody expecting that they're not going to hit you back. That has been my philosophy my whole life. You shouldn't think, oh, I'm a woman, so he's not going to hit. You don't know what somebody's going to do. So to keep yourself safe, don't hit ever. It's just that like when you were talking about the size thing, and I get that because somebody could have a weapon, they could be, anything could happen. It doesn't mean you can't be harmful just because you're small. I was just speaking to the bias that is, like Courtney brought up the example about like her black son. She doesn't have a black son, but like the hypothetical black son in a run-in with the police or something. Yes, he could get in their face and be like, you know what? You're wrong. Da, 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 da. You can do all that. But is it worth it? Like in that moment, that's all I'm speaking to in terms of this. I've never said women should hit men. I've never said it's okay for women to hit men. I have said women should not hit men. Absolutely. But if we're looking at the reality, we know that it's unfair. We know that people are going to have more sympathy for a woman, even if she was the one doing the thing that was, wrong. We understand that. And that's true. And that is messed up. And, that needs to be looked into further. In the meantime, though, don't go to jail when you're not hurt. Just go home.
I'm with you on that part.
That's the whole thing I was saying the whole time.
I get
it.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks, Courtney. Good talking to you, Nathan.
All right, same here.
Thank you, Mr.
I get what you're saying, Kay. And let me say this: for a guy who grew up in a house where he watched his mother and father get domestic violence a couple of times when the father got removed, I do comprehend that logic behind it. But here, what the problem is: when you have a society that make an excuse for women to take advantage of that, it gets to a point whereby Men have two choices: either take it and walk away, or say just screw it, I don't give a care. But in New York City, especially in Brooklyn, I've seen the third option. What men would do with the third option is they'll get a female to come and jump that female. And I've seen that happen a lot of times, which should not be the case at all. But the problem is, this society we live in right now need to change that narrative because it's not helping anybody. We understand that men, we are strong individuals, physically speaking, on a biological level. But it does not give a woman a right to just to play what you will and see if she can get away with it or not. Because if that was the case, if men had to do the same exact thing, they had to love it, it would be kind of stupid. But in reality, it doesn't. How would I say it? Logically speaking, it's like the most dumbest thing a woman can do. To be frank with you right now, because when women feel like, oh, what if you're big? No, 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 no. That's because outside this nation, there's a lot. That's another reason why a lot of sisters don't get married because a lot of black men look at it at another way too, saying that I'm not gonna do with a woman in this state that have that type of logic in their head. It would lead to them want to leave and marry people outside the country. That's a whole different ballgame. But with that mindset being implanted into a lot of women for the past 3 or 4 generations, it's not helping. There need to be things that be changing the law. There need to be something changing the book whereby a whole woman accountable for that. They're doing that right now in some states, but still it's not enough. Because I watched my father and my mom get into a lot of fight growing up, and it wasn't cool. It was not cool at all. They got
I
to
think,
go ahead.
yeah. And again, shout out to you, Black David. It's always good seeing you on these panels, brother. Real quick, I think, and I got to run soon, but so if anybody has any questions before I go, I hate to always leave without people getting a chance to speak. But I will say this to what Black David was saying about what can we do again? What can we do to make this thing even kill, right? For men, because we are at a disadvantage to a woman's words. A woman's words are very, very powerful when it comes to things like this. And I believe, and we do use it, I use it, where we have a thing called false statements, where if a person lies, they exaggerate or they falsify informations, in regards to evidence or to the case that supports them more than the other person that caused that person to be arrested. You can be charged with that additional. But I think when we have a well-known, people know that women can't exaggerate, they can lie in these domestics. I think that there needs to be more of a stiffer penalty for that in order to discourage a lot of that. I think that's when you'll start seeing things turn around. But as it is now, it's a known fact that you have women that do lie in situations like that because they know that the court is going to give them a little extra favor. And then, these incidences are used too in order to control, like, they'll use these domestic situations in order to work in their favor when it comes to custody, child custody issues. So that's a lot of times what it's also used, to piggyback on what Black David was saying. So, it's a very nasty game for men, and we are outgunned in this area. And so to Kay's response and and the angle she was going in, it's always a man's best interest to try to de-escalate as much as you can, remove yourself from a situation, and you got to restrain yourself. And it's not fair, right? And I think a lot of men are frustrated because they've been in this, they've either been or had some experience, they've seen it, they witnessed it. So we understand it's not fair. But again, unfortunately in our community, we're not in any position of power. So it's very hard for us to make certain changes without the support of our, white counterparts. So, that's our current situation, you guys. And I always tell people, if there's a problem, you see the problem, you need to put yourself in position of power to make change. And that's kind of at the end of the day. Until then, we work with what we got. And as men, we don't have a lot. So therefore, your behavior, your actions, and all that stuff have a big, big impact. And you got to choose, as men, we got to choose our partners. We got to choose better partners. And if you see red flags, you need to remove yourself from the situation.
Nathan, you said you're about to leave soon? Or
yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to keep you longer than
you.
What's
up? Go ahead. Let me know what you got.
I'm just still kind of wondering I'm just confused about what I said that was wrong, or like
It's not. You didn't say. It's not that you didn't say anything that was wrong. It was misinterpreted the way you said it.
I'm just wondering.
No, I mean you didn't say anything wrong. I think there's a difference between asking a question and then listening to understand and then listening to respond. Right. That's so like if men say this is how we feel, this is what it is. A lot of times, guys, we're so logical. We really don't want any pushback on that. We just want women to be like acknowledge it. And then say, as women, as a group of women, how can we make the correction, right? So the conversation needs to move. Okay, what can women do better, right? Because that means that you actually care. Because a lot of men feel like their voices falls on deaf ears. And so, what can you do? What can women do? The next conversation should be, how do we hold women accountable? How do we get women to stop? One, to acknowledge, because they do know that their tongue is a weapon. So the question is, how can we get women to stop doing that? How do we get women to stop instigating violence against themselves, right? How do we get women to acknowledge when men don't want to be bothered, that's our way of de-escalating, right? Hey, leave me alone. You're too close, right? Men are telling you right before they blow up. So again, the problem is the law doesn't necessarily look at how women agitate men verbally as a sign of abuse, right? That's abuse.
Yeah, I think verbal abuse and emotional abuse are definitely real.
But no one looks at that, because if so, then it can be considered as a form of aggression, right? So if I say, again, I'm looking for a primary aggressor, I'm looking at who violated whose space, right? Who put a person in fear, who assaulted who first. So I'm looking at these things. Whereas it'd be nice if we incorporate in the law who was being verbally disrespected to the other person, right? Because again, men interpret disrespect different than women. And so if we're looking at the law, we need to be able to understand the nuances. How do men feel when a woman does this? The problem is society looks at a woman's actions and says that it doesn't really matter. Men should be able to deal with it. Men should be able to have tough skin. No, men have emotions just like women. We're not these robots that you can just disrespect and say what you want. And this is the problem. And this is the problem that men are saying, that here we are men, we are humans. We feel. We don't like to be talked to that way. We don't like to be disrespected. We don't like to be spat on, right? But what's happening in society has this thing, well, you're a guy and women are frail, they're smaller, so you should just be able to deal with it. The reality is there are a lot of men who can't deal with it. And sometimes too much of that is why men blow up. So if we want to examine why men lose their cool and start backhanding